everybody. Welcome to Partners in Promise. I am joined today by two awesome ladies. We have obviously Michelle Norman, our executive director and founder. And today we have someone who you may not know, just to look at her, but she is an amazing author. We have the author of The League of Wives, Heath Hardage Lee. And we are so excited to talk with her about this book and the legacy that she has captured for us in this book as military spouses. So welcome, Heath, to
For
talking with us
having
today.
me. This is an honor. Thank you for having me.
So, just so people have some familiarity with you, can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what brought you to the point where you're now meeting with two, Navy wives?
Yes, yes. Well, I love the Navy Wives. I spent a lot of time in Coronado. I tried to always go in January since I'm on the East Coast, since it's so beautiful there. So got to really love Coronado. But the way that I got into this, so I don't come from a military background or a military family. I really came into this story knowing almost nothing. So it was really some kind of a blank slate for me. But I ran across some papers of a woman named Phyllis Galante. And Phyllis had just happened to be a good friend of my mother's, and she had died very unexpectedly. And I knew she was a Navy wife and an activist in the Vietnam War. And that was all I knew about her background, other than just being a friend of my mother's. So her papers ended up at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, where I worked part time. And I've always written about women's history. I've been in this space my whole career as a curator and a writer, and now a biographer. So I knew I was looking for kind of a new book. This was my second book I was planning to write. I was looking for a new topic. So Phyllis's papers, it turned out she was a Navy POW wife during the Vietnam War. Her husband, Paul Galante, was a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton, along with so many names you would know: Jim Stockdale, of course, Jerry Denton, John McCain, many of the names you will know. So Paul was a very young aviator that was shot down in that war. And Phyllis's papers, when I spent about 2 hours with them one Saturday, were like a treasure map. And they led me all over the country to first and foremost to Sybil Stockdale of Coronado, California, who is really the center of the story, because she is the one who founds the National League of Families, which is first known as the San Diego League of Wives, the POWMI group, born in Coronado. And I always tell folks in Coronado that the city needs to really promote this. It is the birthplace not only of naval aviation, but also of the POWMI movement. And no one really knows that. Hopefully that's going to change with some projects I'm working on, as well as the book. But Sybil was the wife of the highest ranking naval POW in Vietnam, Jim Stockdale. So Phyllis's papers, while Phyllis was very important in the National League, she was one of the younger wives, the 20-something wives. The senior wives, like Sybil Stockdale and others, are the ones that take over de facto. And this is one of the great things about the military, is that everyone knew the senior wives would take this over, the younger wives fall into place, but they all work as a unit together to try to get the guys out of the Hanoi Hilton, to try to get them humane treatment. So that's kind of a long way about, but archival papers, which all my books are start with the archival papers, but then they're also based on oral histories in large part. So I spent 4 years coming out to Coronado, hanging out with Sybil's friends. I did get to spend some time with Sybil before she passed away. She unfortunately had Parkinson's, so she couldn't talk. So I really had to rely on her sisters in this POWMIA movement to help tell that story. And boy, did they come through. They were just amazing. And you could see that sisterhood. It really, in some cases, as they said, meant more than blood did, what they went through together as that group of military wives.
Yeah. Well, there's so many amazing, stories. And I love that you know, share about, you know, the papers that you make come to life. Cause, you know, for us, we have a very electronic footprint. All of our stories are, you know, on the internet, and you can kind of trace it, but it does take that curation, that background to kind of piece that together into a story. And so, for people who are not necessarily familiar, um, with the background of what this topic is about, you kind of go through, you know, following the wives. And we say wives because in this case, it
Yep.
wasn't spouses, it wasn't military spouses, it was wives.
Lives.
Um, and so you start the narrative through talking about their experience with, saying goodbye, and, you know, having to, you know, say goodbye while they're going off to Vietnam, and the story and the journey that they take. Was there anything, you know, that you stumbled across in your research that was one of the more surprising facts for you? Because I know that we might know it from the male perspective of the Vietnam War, and their stories, and maybe we've watched a video about, you know, John McCain or something. But what was a little bit different? What did you see that was different than what maybe that everyone else has seen in the movies?
Oh yes. Well, and of course, you know, the men, that story is so compelling, but one thing I felt very strongly about was that that story has been told many, many times, as it should be, and it should continue to be told. But the women's story, and this is so true for women on the home front, military wives, there's so few books, movies, documentaries that talk about this. Even that, for instance, the Ken Burns, the Vietnam documentary that came out, there was barely a mention of this. And I always get very upset as a women's historian when we are left out. So that was really important to me, that it be told completely from their perspective. The men are really kind of off to the side. Of course, they're in the Hanoi Hilton, so they are in a whole different place that we see a little bit of, but it's primarily the home front. And one of the things, surprising things that helped me illuminate this just from the beginning, I mentioned I've been a curator for many years, and I still am a curator. We have a League of Wives exhibit actually that I curated that's been in Coronado, that's still traveling the country. So artifacts are very important. And one of the first things that fell into my hands was the Navy Wives Protocol Guide, which I was like, is this for real? Like, I didn't even, you know, and the copy I have was from the mid 19th. See, I see that Michelle has, I'm sure you all have copies of this.
I don't, but Michelle's better than
Yeah.
me, I think.
I think someone gifted it to me
I
many years ago.
Did you get it for, a lot of times people give it for like a wedding shower,
Yes.
or, you know, they will give it. And now it's sort of tongue in cheek, because if you read the book from the mid 60s, you're like, oh, good God. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
What have I
like,
gotten myself into?
I would
Exactly.
run away, frankly. I would be like, oh no. Like, there is a list actually of what lingerie you should take on your honeymoon, for instance,
Right.
like really important things like this, you know? So, and things like shrimp fork placement, and, you know, ice sculptures and jello molds. So it's very of the time period that you have to look at it. This is the 60s. This is the time period. But there is a lot of useful information, and these guides were to help Navy wives kind of adjust to that life. And Sybil Stockdale talks about in the book, this was her Bible. Like, she could not stop reading it when she got engaged to Jim Stockdale. So this was normal at the time. To our eyes now, it looks pretty sexist, you know. But what is underlying it the whole time is this sort of military propaganda. Like, you as the wife need to be quiet, not to interfere, you know, and also that your rank is his rank, and anything you do reflects on him. Like, you, wife, could ruin his career if you speak out. So this is what these women are kind of indoctrinated with. And these start, by the way, during World War II as kind of morale boosting guides, but then they veer a little off.
Yeah.
So, but that was probably the most surprising and illuminating thing, that it fell into my hands at the perfect time.
You know, there is there's a heavy tradition in the military, both on the active duty side and the military spouse side. And so, you know, as time has progressed, that looks very different. But there is, you know, a legacy, and you did have, some connection to more of a modern story in recent years, where you wrote some op-eds to cover a related topic of the military widows tax, which, for those who are not familiar, there was something called, this is boring, so please bear with me, concurrent receipt issues, where those who had a service-connected death would not necessarily be able to collect their full benefit payment. And that's what they called the widow's tax. Recently, legislation has helped to fix that and correct that for families. And it only just recently fully got corrected as far as families receiving payout. But can you tell us how that kind of happened, where you connected with that group of military families?
Certainly. So yes, I was really appalled to hear about this widow's tax. I mean, you give the ultimate sacrifice, and the government red tape was still preventing military families from getting full benefits for no good reason. And I connected to this because I write in League of Wives about a similar situation that the POW MIA wives encounter, whereby they are not allowed to invest in a 10% savings plan for men who are in combat zones. Were allowed to participate in this wonderful plan. And of course, everybody did it to get that 10% if they had a serviceman over there in Vietnam in harm's way. And really, as I recall, I think anyone who was over in Vietnam could participate in this that was in the military. But the POW MI families were banned because their husbands were in the Hanoi Hilton, quote, not contributing to the economy. Good Lord, what? I mean, I was just baffled by this. And so I drilled down into this and interviewed a lot of the wives, and they said it was a major fight. And they thought at first it was just, red tape oversight, but they appealed to the comptroller general, and they said, nope, you still can't do it because your husband's not contributing to the economy. And there were a couple of other just ridiculous reasons like that. But eventually they did resolve that, but not without a lot of bonding together and fighting for that. So, in the book, they have to fight not only the North Vietnamese communists who are torturing their husbands, but also their own government, their own military institutions, to get justice, to get fairness. So when I heard about the widow's tax, I heard about this actually from a friend in Coronado who is in the military and is good friends with Pat Mearns, who's one of the women in my book. But her name is Pat Mearns, and her husband never returned from Vietnam. But Pat had really been affected by this and said, if she had gotten that whole payout, it would have made all the difference in her life. It was just thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars that she was denied. And so that, of course, made me very upset. And I could see the direct line between the 10% savings plan and this. And so I was like, okay, this needs, a little push. So I was able to write some op-eds for MOA, MOAA, the military, you know them well. So I was able to write some for that national group that I'm sure, it's just a little small thing, but I wanted to do something to try to help.
But in my own reporting and talking with those families, there is this feeling of legacy and connection to having to fight the fights that we never thought we'd have to fight. And that's kind of why we have Michelle joining us today. In addition to, to Heath and hearing her story, is that it's not over. This legacy isn't over. So I would love to hear, a little bit from your perspective. When you're reading the book, Michelle, can you share a little bit about what that was like for you? Because I love the book. I read all about Coronado, and I remembered the moments where I was living there, and I just felt like it came alive to me, these stories.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear your side.
So I had a box of tissues nearby the entire time because it was so emotional. The parallels between what these wives were fighting for and what we do in modern day. And, I always say this, we're not like born to advocate. And it's quite the opposite back in that time frame. They wanted to do what was right, protect their service branch, protect the government, but they finally got backed up into a corner to where they had to kind of like find that grit, that fire within them. Like, we've got to fight for our husbands. And I just loved it because it showed them how they evolved over time to where they're like, finally, we're opening up to saying, you know what, who's going to do this but us? We're the one that has, skin in this. We're the only ones that are really going to push for our loved ones to come home. And so just to see that transformation, and seeing Sybil, who really just took charge from the get-go and had this vision of like, finally, we have strength in numbers. Once we gather all the POW wives on one coast, we get the other ones on the other coast. And guess what? We need to have that one-on-one meetings all the time in Capitol Hill. The fact that she was talking directly about walking the halls, making those relationships, those people that can actually be in a position not only to educate them, but, be able to hopefully put a good word in for them when these moments come up in big meetings regarding how to get these guys back to the US. So I just love the way that she also used the media. That's probably not one of the things that they wanted to do at the very beginning, but I think once they realized that they started educating the public and, going around to different events just to bring light on the situation of their spouses. I just love the fact that they were able to, I guess, manipulate the media to show a spotlight on the harm that was being done and that they were not being treated the way the North Vietnamese said they would be, and so it just was enlightening. I felt very empowered after it. Like, this is amazing that these wives were able to pretty much run the show and, had some power over the White House to get their husbands home. And so I just loved everything, because that's really what we have been doing a lot with our education of, our military kids that are in special education, and, bringing up these stories, these compelling stories of our families, but then uniting and then walking the halls and being able to share, that information to try to make change. And so there were a lot of parallels. And I'm excited. One of my mentors actually met Sybil Stockdale. And I'm sure that was quite the moment for her to be able to exchange stories. And they're just legacies. And I just thrilled. I mean, I think we're going to be seeing this type of movement over and over as military spouses, where if there's something that we can change, we're going to have to come together and do it ourselves and bring light to it, and then partner, and collaborate with others to get the job done. So it was just a fascinating book. And if you haven't read it, folks, you need to go get it, because if there's anything, strength in numbers, and that grit and determination is something that you can only find when you have no other choice.
Yeah. And so hearing that, do you have any through lines of what you really thought gave them that extra push through? Is it the walking the halls? What was the main takeaway for you of how they found that success? What was the main thing that they did that added that extra push to get it done?
Yes. Well, just to piggyback on what Michelle was saying, I mean, it's the strength in numbers to me was huge. Like the individual voices, as I say in the book, it's like they're screaming into the wind, like no one's listening to you on your own, which is terrible. People should listen. But when you come together, when you form a group, and what I thought was so funny, like Sybil would say things like, oh, I waved my magic wand and I made us a group. I mean, it doesn't really even take money sometimes. It was the fact that they had stationery that said the San Diego League of Wives, and they had literally $19 in the checking account. But that magically transformed them into a group to beware of. You got to put a little fear sometimes into the government, particularly. And so they got very afraid of what these women might do or say. And to go back to Michelle, who Michelle is all over this, like the media, like if you can use the media correctly, and these ladies are, pioneers with the media long before hashtags and, social media. These ladies are brilliant at using TV, radio, and public speaking to mobilize. People are horrified when they hear what is happening. All you have to do is tell them in an official group, get the government a little scared of you, maybe even get the military, a little concerned, as they should be, about what is going on, and perhaps they need to send some representatives to talk to you. And it's just amazing to see the power escalate, and it's optics, but these ladies really, again, $19 in the checking account and some $10 stationery, and you are off to the races. Like,
Yeah.
brilliant.
Well, I know
Exactly.
in the book you also detailed, so we talk about a lot advocacy, and it seems like maybe we are going away, not going alongside the government and in doing this, but the ladies did start working alongside and working in conjunction with the military, even learning how to code letters, which was
Yes.
such an amazing detail of your book. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about that. But how, at what point do you think that they decided that, okay, we're working together, but we have to take it up a notch? Because I think that all of military, Michelle and I we believe so much in working alongside, but there's limitations of what the government can do and politics can do and what families almost have to do.
To be fair, different time period, this is the 60s. So there's also this whole layer of sexism. And I'm not saying that's gone away by any means, but it has gotten significantly improved since that time period. So you're also dealing with this layer of sexism and very few women in the government at that point. So there's that, barrier as well. But I think what pushes them over the edge is really the LBJ administration's refusal to acknowledge that torture is going on. Remember, the Navy knows not just the Navy, the whole military, by 1966, they know torture is going on. They don't know the full extent. But by, say, 67, Sybil is coding letters, working with the Navy, working with naval intelligence. So they are working together. And she knows, and they fully know, everyone is being tortured. All the ranking officers and some of the younger ones as well, they're all being tortured. The government is still choosing to keep quiet. It resonates today with so many different movements too, that keeping quiet when what you need to do to save lives is to go public. So at that point, when we get a couple of years in, so the wives have all been told to keep quiet, to say nothing about any of this to anybody. So they've been suffering for, say, 3 years in silence. And Sybil is the first one to say, I am done with this, people. And she does clears it with naval intelligence and tells them, she doesn't do it out of nowhere. She says, I'm going to the media. And her contact, Bob Burrows, who's a little bit of a maverick, by the way. You need to always find a little maverick person to help you. Seriously, you got to have that. So Bob Burrows goes to, tells her, do it. She goes to the San Diego Union Tribune, goes to the media, doesn't tell the full story, but says the North Vietnamese are violating the Geneva Conventions of War and the world should know. So that's enough to make everybody go, oh, wow, something is going on here. So that, that's where I think things start to escalate. And when they start to deviate from just trying to work hand in hand with the military to going out to some outside sources, i.e. the media, Ross Perot, outside folks to help. And you need that outside perspective sometimes, I think, to even see these things.
Yeah.
So that's.
But you also do need to have that inside perspective in order to know what is being done and what's not being done too, because coming at something, wanting to make a change, and I'm speaking, more in general versus this particular story, but, in wanting to make change, you can come out as an outsider, but having that insider information really gives added strength to the ultimate goal, result that they found with telling their stories, because they were working in conjunction with the military. So we could probably go on tour with you or something, because I love your book. I feel like we know your book so well. If you need any spokes ladies, we'd be happy to
exactly that
go on
really
tour with
fun.
you.
I'd love to do a tour of the military wives or spouses groups. I know now there's spouses groups. I mean, I think this is important for the spouses to have, because I don't think there are a lot of documents about, like, if you wanted to look at your history, see the legacy and draw the lessons. I mean, I was looking for that when I was writing the book, and I honestly didn't find much except the protocol guides. So
yeah. It's a story that's not as much as told. As a writer myself, I love telling it, but it's live and it's right now, and it's not looking back the way that this is, and that's really an amazing gift that you've given our community and in writing this story. And so there's a lot going on as far as this legacy. Do you think that in doing your interviews and your research, do you think that they realized the legacy that they were leaving behind for the rest of us?
No, no. And it, you know, I said something, I think I say this somewhere in the book, or maybe I've said this in interviews, you know, when history is happening to you, you really don't know it. And particularly when you are women in the 60s, like, you know, you're kind of taught you're invisible. And so none of these ladies really thought at the time they were doing anything but absolutely what they should be doing to get their husbands out. So even when I came, so I started this, gosh, now it's been 6 or 7 years ago when I started coming to Coronado, some of the ladies told me, you know, they had really wanted someone to write their story, and they had tried to get people, they had even considered paying someone to write this, and nobody wanted it. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is a huge unknown, you know, hidden figures kind of story. It reminded me a lot of that book, you know, with the NASA scientists, with the Black women that
amazing.
I mean, it very similar, you know, and I was writing it kind of at the same time, but I was aware that was going on. And it reminded me a lot of that, or the Astronauts' Wives book, about those wives, like John Glenn's wife and others who just were so discounted for, or just minimized or invisible. And I thought, well, what if you could shed some light on this? This is an amazing story. Why would you pay anyone to write? I mean, this is a gift for this to fall in my hands. But, you know, unfortunately, I think we're only just seeing the tip of the iceberg with women's history, with people really getting how much is out there that we just haven't bothered to really uncover. So I was thrilled to be able to do it. I couldn't believe no one had found this before.
There's something to be said about a diary, and that gave so much information for your book. I just don't know how often we can rely on that in the future, you know, as far as just kind of chronicle, looking at what is happening day to day and the feelings of these spouses, because there's so much turmoil on what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And then I was also struck by the fact that as time went on, you know, 5 years or so, they're exhausted. These spouses were exhausted. They were on the point of like mental breakdowns, and it took a toll on them, you know, to always have this brave face and be able to advocate. But, you know, it shows the importance of taking care of yourself, you know, and they had children, you know, that they had to also take care of on a daily basis. So it's a lot to do, just like a normal, you know, modern military spouse. So it was good to see that little bit of a light shine on that, you know, these are important issues, but it does, you know, it's a burden to do this. And they were just rock stars to be able to handle so much. And then when they need to step away, they did take a step away, but they came back, you know, and they were even more energized at that point. So,
and then Sybil was so frank about her mental health struggles, which at the time was just, you know, really amazing that she would even talk about that. I mean, it was seen as so, like, now we just don't even think about that. You would go, hopefully you would go get the help you needed, but she was very frank about it. And I think that helped the other women to feel comfortable when they needed to take a break. So they had this little society, you know, and I talk about like New Girl Village, you know, in the book, where it's sort of that women are paralleling what the men have at the Hanoi Hilton, which sounds weird, but they have this really kind of supportive, it's sort of insulated society where they all look out for each other. They all take care of each other. And this is one of the things I find so wonderful about military spouses on the home front. Everybody knows they need to take care of each other. This is something in civilian life I don't think you see as strongly as with military families.
You mentioned earlier a couple different projects you're working on. One I know is something that we're going to share with our, well, I mean, both of them we're going to share, but you're talking about doing a petition to have some of the items you curated permanent collection in Coronado. So can you Can you tell our audience what they can do to help and what that entails?
Oh, well, thank you for asking about that. Yes, I mentioned earlier, we have an exhibit called the League of Wives that has traveled the country. We're getting up to almost 250,000 people that have seen it. It was at Coronado Historical. It's now going to Wisconsin this summer, to Neillsville, Wisconsin, to the High Ground, which is a really like a Vietnam veterans sort of veterans pilgrimage site. But in doing that, in doing the book, we realized that the women that started this movement across the country, led by Sybil Stockdale, really need a memorial. We think it's really important that there be a memorial statue of some sort. And because there's such a conversation being in the museum world about memorials, what they should be, many are going down across the country. So let's put something positive up. And women's statues are so minimal. I mean, it's ridiculous that I need some statistics on hand to show people, but it's incredibly low. And so we need to have more women memorialized. So there is a movement in Coronado through the Coronado Arts Council to put up a statue of the League of Wives based on the cover of the book. So there are two women on the cover, Sybil Stockdale and Pat Mearns. Pat's in the purple coat, and then Sybil's off in white on the far right. Those two ladies are Coronado, were and are Coronado residents. So they would be in the statue. Then we have Andrea Rander, who's an African-American woman, Army POW wife, Louise Mulligan, who's a Virginia Beach POW wife, on the cover, and then Phyllis Galante, who's the one whose papers I saw originally was a Richmond, Virginia POW wife. So there's a movement to actually have a sculptor we've already got engaged who's sculpting a figurative sculpture very similar to that we would like to put up. The library in Coronado is interested in being the site. So we are going to city council soon. We'd like to have 1,000 signatures on that petition. I think we've got about 300. We just put it out, but would love to get, anyone that could sign and support that. And there's no money.
Do they need to be residents of Coronado, or can they be just supporters of the movement?
They can really be supporter. At this point, it's open to everyone. Of course, we love having that local support, but it is open. Anyone can sign it. We would love to have as many signatures as we can before we go to city council. We've got a lot of support for it. So, and the Arts Council, the Coronado Arts Commission approached me about it. So it was not my idea, but I love that. And I am the historian on the memorial committee trying to get it done. We would love it. Thank you. We need that. It needs to be the grassroots support, just like the League of Wives. It's got to come from the community. We've got to show the community wants that. And it seems like it'd be a great fit for Coronado. So
yeah. And speaking of Coronado, I don't know if you know, but a few years ago, there was a little film that was filmed in Coronado called Top Gun. There was the follow-up movie was filmed there. And I, speaking of movies, I hear that there might be a movie in the works. What's going on with that? What can you tell us? I don't know if you're allowed to say
yes.
too much, but
I am so glad.
You like that segue? That was just like,
I love it. Perfect. That is a perfect segue. And that's what I always say. Good Lord, if Tom Cruise and Top Gun can film there, certainly the League of Wives can film in Coronado. I am pushing so hard.
I was in it. I was an extra. Yeah.
Oh my God. And didn't you
they had military spouses as extras. That was the whole a thing. So, I think that there's a precedent here.
Oh my God. Okay. So this time military spouses are the stars and the men can be extras. That's where this one should go. So that is so cool you were in it. That's exactly what I have asked. Well, I'll explain a little bit about
me. Give us the backstory here.
Backstory, but I'm pushing hard for Coronado because Coronado is a character in the book. The whole prologue is about Coronado. It's really important. So I'm pushing hard for that. No worries. So before the book was even done, I mean, the manuscript was done, but before we got into edits, Reese Witherspoon and Sony Pictures got a hold of it, and I have a wonderful agent in LA, Jason Reichman, who got it into the right people's hands, and they optioned it before the book was published. And so we are in the process now. I'm an executive producer, which of course my children laugh, and that doesn't make any difference in my house whatsoever. But I try to pull that, and they're like, "What's for dinner? Who cares? Whatever." But anyway, I am a producer on the film, and I'm working with the screenwriter. The script is done, but it's going through some drafts, and so we're at that point where we're almost finished with the script. And fingers crossed it will get made, and I hope Coronado will be in it. And Reese has been very supportive of the whole thing. Of course, you probably know she's very into women's history and supporting women's stories. She was I told my agent, if I could pick anyone to do this, that's who it would be. And thank goodness she somehow heard that in the atmosphere. So I'm really excited about that. COVID slowed us down quite a bit. So, that's why things are a little in flux, but we're, as far as I know, as of very recently, things are moving forward.
I just think if anyone needs inspiration, or if someone's on the fence on maybe trying to change something that they see that may be systemic, that needs to be looked at, that needs to be changed, pick this book up, because it really is insightful. It's powerful, and there is no holding anyone back, once they put their mind to it. And just to see the transformation of these military spouses going from a, outsider to someone who was actually running the show and getting these guys home, it's just a wonderful story. And it's something that I think we as military spouses should know that we can do it too. And we are. There's some amazing advocates out there, and we just need to highlight. And I think once folks see that, it'll just snowball, and we'll make this a better military and better community all over. So I am just excited and thrilled that you're here today with us, and whatever we can do to support you, regarding petition or extras, you name it, we'll be happy to do that. Absolutely. So thank you so much for coming out today and talking to the viewers. Hopefully we can have you out again. We'll talk a little bit more about how the movie's going.
I would love to come back anytime, and love what you all are doing with your mission. I think that is so important. As I do have 2 children of my own who, can be interesting sometimes, 2 teenagers, but I know what it's like. You have to fight for these things. And I do think these women provide a really good grassroots model that should be highlighted, so spouses now can look back and have some kind of model to operate from. So I really appreciate you having me on and highlighting the book, and I would love to partner with you on anything that will help you, and appreciate the support on the petition. We could definitely use all the help we can get with that.
Well, thanks. And thanks everyone for watching. Again, League of Wives, you can get it online. Even if the library, anything, just read this book. It's so great. It's a great book. And so thank you so much for joining us. And thanks everyone.